All right, my last video for today, unless some news happens in between now and when I do the preview video tonight for tomorrow's games. But I want to talk about the Oilers. There was somebody who said, hey, now do this for the Oilers on my Toronto video. Well, the Oilers were already queued up. So I've delayed Florida for the end in the East, and in the West, I debated about saving Edmonton for last, but why not do it now? So they lost the play-in round to Chicago. That wasn't supposed to happen. And I was as surprised as anybody that it happened. I thought this team was, at the very least, going to end up in the playoffs. And then, of course, there are those who will say, well, you know, if they had been allowed to play in the round robin, if they'd bumped Dallas down, they'd still be playing, kind of thing. I don't think this team had it. I don't think this team had it this year. The general manager, Ken Holland, he's got some work to do. Coach is Dave Tippett. And Tippett was excellent during the regular season, was one of those guys that people said, hey, we need to have Tippett as coach of the year. And then it it didn't happen. And the thing is, what happened against Chicago doesn't mean Tippett's a bad coach. I think just the makeup of this team and the defense, which is strange because a Dave Tippett coach team, defense is supposed to be their defining characteristic. And in that round against Chicago, they just looked passive and disinterested on certain plays. And I'm not saying those players were, just that's definitely how it appeared when you're watching the game. So what we're looking at with the Oilers moving forward is a roster that's going to look a lot like the one that finished the season and went through that playoff. Your top six, Nugent Hopkins, who likely would stay on the line with McDavid. I'm going to say Yamamoto ends up on that first line, but if he ends up on the first or the second, it doesn't matter. Archibald technically was on that line by the end of the year. I don't think Archibald's going to be a top six for Edmonton. Athanasiou, Draisaitl, and Kassian. And the big question mark being Puljujarvi. What did they do in the offseason with Jesse Puljujarvi? That's the big question mark. What do you do with the kid? He's got the talent. Is he going to be a member of this team? Does he come in and bump down Nugent Hopkins? Does Nugent Hopkins end up on a third line as the center, which is where he should be? Again, for the Oilers, they've had this appearance of being kind of a top-heavy team, and their top six is great, and their bottom six is kind of a mismatch. And that needs to change. So if Puljujarvi comes in, and of course Neal could potentially end up in a top six role as well, especially if Athanasiou decides he wants a ton of money, and Holland decides he's not going to pay him that ton of money. I don't know how this is going to go in the offseason because it's really unpredictable, what with the flat cap and all of that. But Neal could end up in the top six. Definitely produced as a top six early in the season, and then it fell off fast. And Neal's production is like that. He is very hit and miss, where he will be red hot, 10 goals over 6 games hot, and then no goals in the next 15. So that's that feast or famine with Neal has been his way, and this year it seemed to be even more so than normal. Their top 4 blue line, this is where the concern creeps in, and yet I like Darnell Nurse, I like Ethan Bear, I like Oscar Klefbom, and honestly, I like Adam Larsson. I like all 4, which leads me to think maybe one of the 4 gets traded to try to improve things, because the one problem is they don't have that explosive offensive defenseman you need. So while Toronto, you can argue they've got Morgan Rielly, that's their guy who could potentially win a Norris at some time, there isn't really a Norris-level defenseman here. And Ethan Bear being in the top 4, I like Ethan Bear a lot, but I do think that if Bouchard or Broberg were to bump somebody down, and maybe Bear ends up on that second pairing, and maybe Larson gets bumped down, gets moved out, something happens there, and either Broberg or Bouchard jump into that top spot, that would be advantageous for the Edmonton Oilers going forward. They need that offensive blue liner. They need that player. Now, he has to be defensively sound as well, but they need that guy. And I know Nurse produces points, but I don't see Nurse as being a guy that necessarily you could say, well, eventually he could develop into a Chara-esque kind of defenseman. Chara won Norris trophies. I don't know that I see that with Nurse, but we'll see, right? So their top 4 is good, but we saw against Chicago, it's vulnerable. And so I think an upgrade is needed on that blue line. And in net, I don't know. Did they stay with Smith? Does he come back for another year? He sounds like he's open to coming back for another year. Koskinen, was the starter for a lot of the year, and then he just wasn't. And so this is an issue for Edmonton where they're goaltending. It feels like both Alberta teams are in the same spot, doesn't it? It feels like when we talk about one Alberta team, we could easily make a lot of those same complaints about the other Alberta team. It's weird. And then Skinner may very well find himself as the backup if they let go of Smith. But in reality, they'll probably bring somebody else in. The trick is they have $11 million in cap space for next year. That flat cap is hitting a lot of teams hard. And as I get through this series, you'll see just how many teams don't have cap space. And they might be looking at buyouts. And there might be buyouts of players we're not even thinking of as buyout candidates right now because of the flat cap. So where GM goes, I don't want to lose this guy, but we need to buy him out because look at the situation we're in with the cap, and we can improve ourselves, but we're going to have to hurt the roster to help it later. So we'll see what happens. Riley Sheahan is a unrestricted free agent. And again, if they let him go, I would understand. There are other players that can play his role with the team. Ennis was good in his limited time as a member of the Oilers, and of course he got hurt in that series against Chicago. I would not be surprised to see Ennis come back, but what's the price tag going to look like? Patrick Russell, probably on his way out, I would think. Mike Green, of course, who retired. So Green is out of the picture altogether, NHL-wise. And Smith in net. So, again, do they bring back Smith? Do you sign him for another year? Or do you say, you know what, we need to get a younger goaltender in here? Because Koskinen's not a young kid either. He's, 31, 32? He's not a young kid. So what you see with Koskinen, that's probably about as good as it's going to get. And if we're going to agree, well, he's probably not like a number one starter who should play 60 games, then you have to look at upgrading your goaltending overall. And again, they ended up going to Smith a lot for a team that seems to, with the contract Koskinen got, seem to have been willing to go all in with Koskinen, and then quickly Tippett's going to Smith often. Now, he's familiar with Smith, so we'll see if things change when it's not Smith who's the backup / 1B goaltender. But your guess is as good as mine on what they're going to do with their goaltending and their blue line, because that's where things need to change. Restricted free agents, as I said, Athanasiou, we'll see what he wants. If it's $2.5 $3 million, that'll bring him down to $8 million in cap space. Ethan Bear's going to get a large raise, but how much? And a Detroit fan right now watching this will go, oh, Ken Holland with contracts, this should be fun. Because again, in his time in Detroit, he would sometimes sign contracts that you looked at later and said, I don't know that you're going to get full value. And I had that feeling with the Cassian extension when that was signed. So we'll see how much Bear gets. We'll see if these guys get paid a little more than they probably should. And Matthew Benning's in that list as well. He's not a top 4 defenseman, but he's a solid 5/6 defenseman. So there's nobody there that's going to break the bank, but it does make it difficult for them if they're looking to upgrade the blue line. They can't really make a big pitch for Pietrangelo because they're not in a position with cap space unless they move Larson or they move Clefbaum or something along those lines. Bear and Nurse, I would think, are untouchable. Clefbaum and Larson probably should be, but if they have a shot at Pietrangelo, maybe that makes Clefbaum a guy that they move, and then there would be a lot of teams, I would think, that would line up for his services if he were available. Again, it's going to be interesting to see if Holland tries to fix that, or if it's just business as usual, and they figure with Broberg or Bouchard they can fix things from within. Their draft, well, they draft 14th, and then they don't draft again until the 5th round. So Ken Holland, who's known for being a magician at the draft, he may have to be. Because they draft in the 1st round, and then he can go home for a while, because then it's rounds 5, 6, and 7. I know it's going to be a virtual draft. It'll be held on a Zoom call, much like the NFL draft, but still, they also don't have next year's 2nd round pick. So there's issues with Edmonton, and the one problem I have is, so we're talking about the holes in this roster and how they need to improve things. They do have a number 14 pick, which is good in a deep draft. And maybe you pick a defenseman at 14 if you're the Oilers. maybe you decide that's a spot where you can take a Schneider or a goalie. And again, that's the same thing I said with Toronto, right? So it's possible one goes to Toronto and one goes to Edmonton of those two defensemen should they fall to that point. And if Jake Sanderson was to fall to 14, there's no way he gets past Edmonton. But I don't think Sanderson falls to 14. But the fact that they have these issues and they don't have enough draft picks, that's troubling. Because we're already looking at a team that may be cap-strapped as soon as now. Where depending on what Bear gets, depending on what Athanasiou gets, and depending on how they fix their goaltending, they may not have any cap space next year whatsoever. And again, they will not be alone in this, but they're a team that's looking to make improvements and to prove to Connor McDavid, hey, we're building around you and we're building around Leon Draisaitl, and we're going to make this great team that can contend for and win Stanley Cups. To get there, some stuff's got to be fixed. I think they've got the right general manager to win a cup as long as he can manage those contracts. And I think they've got the right coach in Dave Tippett. The roster, unclear. Let me know what you guys think. Who needs to maybe be moved out and how you fix things if you're the Oilers GM. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.